Hi, my name's Andy Needham and I had the pleasure of hosting the Oddly Satisfying Render Challenge on behalf of Maxon and the Corridor crew. We're going to take a look at Oscar Peterson's render. Oscar's entry was so satisfying to watch, absolutely mesmerizing. One of the key things that caught my eye was the undulating spiral cylinders. In this tutorial we'll recreate a similar effect using splines and MoGraph. Let's dive into Cinema 4D and take a look. I've got a helix spline already here. We've got it set up like so, just some adjustments to the start radius and end radius just to create this spiral shape. So let's just build out the cylinder geometry first. I'm going to start with a circle spline and put it on the XZ plane. Let's just bring this down. And I just want to put a cap on this. So I'm just going to make an extrude, set this to Y and 0. And then from here, what I'm going to do is we're going to do our extrusions with MoExtrude. So the MoExtrude will need to be a deformer, or it's going to act on this geometry. So in order to do that, it needs to be on the same level of hierarchy. So currently this is next to the extrude in the hierarchy. If we put it under a null, oops. So we'll just group this, Alt-G. Then you can see it's actually doing something. It's not exactly what we want. I want to just change my extrusion steps to 1 and come into the coordinates, the transformation coordinates, set this to 0, and these are going to all be 1. Now a quick tip for highlight is to highlight all of these, set your parameter, hold down Control or Command, press Enter, and then all the highlighted parameters will be the same. So we can then work with an effector to drive the extrusion. So we're going to use a plane effector. Set this to object, otherwise it's going to do something strange, because we expect when we manipulate the y-axis that it's going to go up and down, but this is all relative to the node, so we need to set this relative to the object that we're dealing with, and then we can increase this value. The next thing we'd like to do is give some beveling to this. Again, it's a hierarchical thing, so the bevel, if we find it in our deformers list, it's at the bottom here, and we put it after our extrude here. This should do something nice, so we'll just set this to 3 and 3. It's all about the order of operations. Okay, so if this was our bevel was first, it was up here, then it's not going to know what to do because the MoExtrude is creating the geometry, so that's what that's doing, and then we can bevel these edges that have been created. Just press NB just to see what we've got here. Looking good. So from there we will call this cylinder, then we'll put that into a cloner. So we'll hold down Alt and click on here to create the cloner, and it puts it into the basic grid mode. I'm going to switch over to advanced and we'll browse for a distribution. So we're going to use the spline bead distribution, and you'll immediately see the difference when we drop the helix underneath the spline bead distribution here. You'll see that this is neatly and equally putting our clones along here, along our helix. It's calculated the size of these, and it's given us enough to fill the whole spline. Now that's based on these modes that we have here. I'm going to change my color to constant and just put in like a pink color so it matches the reference that we have for Oscar's work. Feel free to change this. Now you're going to get, because this is kind of filling up the whole spline, you're going to get like maybe this little stray one. Now we'll come back over to distribution and just change our fill gap to none, and that's going to get rid of that. The next thing we want to do, if we just press play on this, nothing's really happening. I noticed some really nice kind of rotational movement, and we can get that by just rotating our spline. So if we go to frame 0 and set our heading to 0, we've got a 200 frame scene. So we'll jump to the end, and I'm going to set this to -360 because that's the direction I want this to travel. I want these to be linear keyframes. So we can open up our dope sheet here, highlight both keyframes for our helix, and just come over to here. You can press T6 really quickly, or just click this little linear icon here. And that has now changed the curve to be linear instead of this curved shape. So instead of it slowly easing in and out, which are going to get this nice linear motion, which is exactly what we want for this particular effect. Let's figure out how we're going to make these grow. Now, I said we're going to use a plane effector, which we already have in the scene. So we can just drop this here. So this plane effector, we could use the spline as a driver to create this change in Y position. So we'll drop our spline into the fields like so. And that's already going to give us something pretty cool. If we just rewind, just press play. So at the moment, the only motion we have is the rotation on our helix. Okay. Now, back in the plane effector, what we can do is we can make this grow by adding a curve. So you can find it in this list here. Grab the curve. Okay, and now what we're going to do is just scroll down, take this point here and move it over. You can see, look how we're changing, we're remapping the values over the curve. So we can go from nothing to this, and then if you hold down Control or Command, click into the graph, we'll go to the end here. So this, let's just adjust our values. Now, to be more accurate with the spline, we can just drop this arrow down, right? And when you highlight a point, you get to see the tangents and things like that. So on the right, we can have like 0.2 and the height 0, like so. And then on this one, we could say, you know what? Oops. We could say, actually, I want this to be minus 0.2 and 0. And then with this, we're going to put it back into the middle. So we'll set the point X to be 0.5. And then with these, we want to go 0 and 0, and then just like so. I think we'll just leave it like that. Now, this is, as I've been doing that, you may have been just keeping your eye on the viewport and just seeing what's going on there as we're playing back, which is really interesting. More interesting when we drop in some speed. So we've got 200 frames to play with. Let's just set that to 200. And what's happening is they're just kind of doing one sort of motion here. And I want this curve to imagine, right, that it's continuing like this before and continuing in the same way after. So before the curve, we're going to loop, and after the curve, we're also going to loop. And now we are getting that undulating, growing animation that is so appealing. All right, let's pause the playback. I think we're nearly there with this. We just need to maybe adjust the scale of the clones. So we'll grab our cloner, we'll get another plane effector, and we're going to set the, not going to change the position, we're going to change the scale, uniform scale, and something like so. Let's use a field to control this. We're going to use a spherical field and just make this a lot larger. Something like that, just so it encompasses these clones like so. Maybe a bit bigger, just like that. Now with that off, yeah, we're going to get some cool gradual kind of scaling happening. So we'll call this our plane scale, and this is our plane Y position. Okay. And then what we need to do is make some instances of these. So just play that back and you can see they're growing. It's kind of nice. They're not overlapping or anything. All right, interesting. Let's just drop this under a group. Null, maybe we will take our cloner and do an instance of that. A render instance. I'm going to set the heading to 120 degrees. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Let's make another copy of that. So Command or Control click and drag, and we'll just set the rotation to be 240. All right, now that's filled in that gap really nicely. Cool. I'm going to hide, oh, don't want to move it. I'm going to hide the spherical field from view and just rewind and press play. And you know what? It may not be exactly what Oscar did, but it's pretty close. It's another technique. You know, there are so many ways of doing similar results in Cinema 4D. And yeah, this is just another one of those things. So if we bring in our environment that we have here, I've got a little backdrop there. Let's change my shading to quick shading, just so we can see it nicely. And there we go. Frame that up. And there we have it. We're using a really cool new distribution, the spline bead distribution, and some classic things like MoExtrude. You know, that doesn't really get used enough these days. And it's a super powerful thing when you can combine it with your effectors and that traditional sort of MoGraph workflow. Of course, there's so much more that you could do with this, as Oscar demonstrated in his entry. So there's a couple of techniques for creating really satisfying motion in Cinema 4D. Thanks for watching. I hope that was useful. Be sure to check out the Oddly Satisfying Render Challenge channel over on Framerate, and check out the other amazing renders that made the top 50. My name's Andy Needham, and I'll see you in another tutorial.